Hi guys, another video here for you. I'm going to do things a little differently from now on. The idea at the start was to produce one of these updates once a week that would explain the current state of the project, but realistically that frequency is not feasible for me. I'm just too busy. So I'm going to put out these videos less frequently, say every 2 or 3 weeks, but instead I will go into a lot more detail about my workflow and the techniques that I use, and I think that way they'll present more value to you guys as well. They'll be more interesting for you. So the last week or so I've been working on this instrument panel here. This is in the cockpit of the spacecraft. It's toward the top. So there are 4 stations, and I've done one of them. So this is the Navigator station here. And then I'm currently working on the one over here. This is the flight engineer station. So you can see the structure is the same, but it's symmetrical. But the actual instruments will be a little different. There aren't going to be any close-up shots, I don't think, that show off this. But it was a good opportunity to practice the workflow, and it's always a good idea to test your techniques somewhere where the camera won't see close up. And that way, by the time you go to make the sort of hero assets, you'll have ironed out a lot of the mistakes. So these 2 stations, I'll do these last because you'll see them much more clearly. So let's jump into Max, and I'll explain how I went about making these. Here's the scene in Max, and here is the first set of panels that I did for the Navigator station. And over here I'm working on the flight engineer station. Because these structures are inside a cone and it's a kind of confined space, it means that I'm working with a lot of oblique angles, which is not ideal in Max. You can't really work at an angle like that. So the first step is to get these completely upright, and then, well, you can see that I've done that over here. Now the way to do that, I'll show you, is first of all, I'm going to select the structure, and I've disabled all these modifiers here, and I'm going to say, let's take this panel here, detach that as a clone, okay, and then I'm going to create a box with auto grid turned on and use that panel as a reference, and then I'll select that detached panel and link it to that box, and then you can create another box. It doesn't matter where, it's completely arbitrary. And you select your box that has the orientation of the panel and just align it with this box. You don't need to necessarily align position, it's just the orientation. And then you have a flat panel. And I prefer to work with these upright. So we'll just rotate that 90 degrees. Just like that. And you can do this for all your panels, and that will give you something like this. And then the way to get your instruments back in position is, let's just say we've done all our instruments. Okay, let's just grab these. Just for now, I'll clone these over here. Let's just move them into position. So let's just say that that's our instrument panel. What we're going to do is link these to this panel here, and we don't need this box anymore, or these boxes. You can see I've done it a few times. All we have to do is take this and align it with the parent structure, orientation and position if we've moved it, and then we can actually delete it, and there our instrument panels are correctly oriented and positioned. Once you have these reference planes in place, the next step is to get some reference images on them. So what you want to do is take a screenshot of this, making sure that you're looking at them orthographically, so like this, and bring that into Photoshop, and you want to crop that exactly to the edges of the planes, so you can see that corner just touches the edge there, same there, same there, same there. And then you need to get your reference images. So I have a pure ref board. This is the reference that I'm using for these instrument panels. So this is from Flight Engineer Station on various aircraft. And what I'll do is I'll screenshot this. So I'll pick a part that I like and I'll screenshot it. And then paste that into Photoshop. Oops, there we go. And then I will use the free transform distort tool to get it relatively straight. And I'm using these guides here to make sure that these lines are vertical and horizontal like that. And also just take a look at circular elements and make sure that they actually are circular and they're not elliptical. So we need to stretch this one out a bit to the side. That will do, that's perfectly fine. And then you can delete the parts that you don't need. So let's just say we're focusing on this center panel, like that. And then you use free transform once again to get that into position where you want it and at the scale that you want it. Okay, so I've already done that and I did all of these. You just have to make sure that the scale is consistent between them, and this would be a lot easier if your panels were square or rectangular. In my case they aren't, so I need to spend a bit of time to fit them around each other. So once you've done that, you would save this image, you jump back over to Max and you create a basic material and you bring in your image that you just saved, pipe that into the base color, apply that to your object, and what you need is a UVW map. You can use the same map for all three, which I've done here, and you would just press fit, and you might have to rotate it 90 degrees, and then your reference imagery will line up perfectly, and then you can start modeling after that. So I've been modeling this area here, and this is what I've done so far. For the modeling, there's nothing too special happening. I don't like using subdivision. So it's poly modeling, you know, it's chamfer modifiers. And for these panels here, I just use a spline like that, which I extrude. And then I put an edit poly on top of that. And that edit poly is just, I select all these faces and I bevel them. Now if you do that and you get shading artifacts, you probably will. You just need to put in a few cuts here and there, and that should clear up those artifacts. That's because this face is quite hard to triangulate because there's so many holes in it. So you just need to put in a few cuts and that should clear that up. I delete the back face because I don't need that. And then a chamfer modifier on top, and that gives me a fairly decent result. Over here I did mostly the same, but I did use Fusion 360 for a few of these. Some forms are easier to make in Fusion 360 in my opinion. But I don't really have a clear policy, it's more like, you know, what I feel like in the moment. So there's the screen. You know, we have a few more bits and pieces here. This is just a multi-body part. I do everything in the same file with the same feature history. I don't bother creating a new part, and then I just export them one by one as an IGS into Max. For these, all these little switches, they're made in Max. They're all instances of each other, and once I have them in position, I use a script by a guy called Blevins. He has a bunch of scripts called SoulBurnScripts, which you should get if you don't have for 3ds Max. So thanks, Neil. And one of them is Transform Randomizer. It just allows you to specify a range and you just randomize all your transforms to offset them a little bit, just to break up all this completely straight lines. That's it really. There's nothing else, nothing fancy happening there. A lot of the detail in this comes from the texturing. and in this case it comes from the text markings that you see like in white. To do that, I use texts and splines in 3ds Max. I don't really like using Photoshop, so if I can avoid it, I do. So here they are in 3D space, and you have a bunch of text objects and splines with an extrude modifier set to 0, and in some cases just renderable splines. So once I have all those in position, using the panel itself as a reference, I make 2 renders. One of them is with the panel and the markings, and then the other one is just with the markings isolated. And I bring those into Photoshop. So here we have the markings isolated, and here we have the panels. I copy paste the markings into this one, and they line up perfectly. And then I crop this to the edges of the panels, and then I make the resulting image square using image canvas size, and I fill in whatever space is left with black, which will give me a square image with the markings like this. So I save this, and this is what I bring into Substance Painter to use as a mask. So here we are, and here's my markings layer, and it's a fill with the planar projection, and it should line up perfectly. You can always move it around, but if you crop it accurately, it should line up. And of course I can change the color of the text. In this case it's a fill layer, but you could use a paint layer if you wanted to have different sections have different colors. In some cases a planar projection won't work. In this example there is a sphere here, and I want this to be able to rotate in any direction. So to do that, I created another sphere and convert that to an editable poly, select the edges that you want, and just create a shape from selection like that. And I ended up with something that looked like this. So these were all edges from that sphere that I copied. And for the text, all you have to do is create your text with auto grid turned on, and you just pick a point on the sphere like that. If you want, you can rotate it. And then just turn on effect pivot only and align this pivot with the spheres pivot like that. And then you can copy that as many times as you want, and it will always be glued to the surface of the sphere. And that gave me this kind of cage-like object, which I'm going to use to project in ZBrush. Now, unfortunately, I don't have access to my ZBrush license because somebody else from work is using it, so I can't show you exactly what I did, but I'll just quickly explain. I export this and bring it into ZBrush and fill it with white color, and then I take my sphere, which is no longer in position here, but it's down here. So this guy here, which has UVs, and I bring that into ZBrush as well. Now these occupy the exact same space and they're the same scale. So my sphere, I subdivide that plenty of times, and then I project the poly paint data from this spline cage onto that sphere. And then I create a texture map from Polypaint, and I export that texture map. And that gives me an image that I can bring into Substance Painter and just add on top. So in this case, I need to make sure that it's set to UV projection and not planar like the last one was, because that image that ZBrush outputs will be in UV space. Remember that ZBrush always flips images vertically, so you'll need to flip it in Photoshop before you bring it into Substance Painter. For the computer screen, I just found a screenshot of QuickBasic. QuickBasic is an old programming language for beginners, which my brother played with a lot when he was younger, and I thought it looked perfect for what I wanted, so I just found a screenshot of it online, And that's the same screenshot with just the text rearranged, and I just quickly painted in this stuff here. And that is both in the base color and it has an emissive channel. And for the structure, I actually investigated using tiling textures that I wanted to layer on top of each other and then create a mask to get the edge wear. And the idea was that it would allow me to get a higher overall resolution, and I erroneously thought that I could use triplanar mapping for all of that. But in the end, I decided to just texture it the normal way because I needed unique UVs anyway to do the mask. So in that case, I might as well just all do it in Substance Painter. Here it is in Painter. And then I added just a few little details here and there to add a bit of realism. And that's it really. That's the update for now. So next, well, I've got to finish this one and then I'll do these two stations here. So I hope this little deep dive into my workflow was enjoyable for you, and I'll see you on the next one.